take a look at this photograph. That's right, that's Rosemary Kennedy. She had a brother you have perhaps heard of. She is also the most famous victim of the single most barbaric, single most disgusting, pseudoscientific torture method ever sold as medicine, the prefrontal lobotomy. Here, have some more. Look at these faces, the hollow lifeless eyes, the blank stares. This procedure that didn't just kill people, it hollowed them inside out while they still lived. It stole everything that made them human and left the body walking around like a ghoul. And the sickest part, that it wasn't done by back alley butchers. It was done by respected, white-collared, bespectacled doctors. Men who went to medical school, took the Hippocratic Oath, and then drove an ice pick through someone's eye socket because a father wanted his daughter to calm down. We are told medicine has rules, review boards, ethic committees. So how the hell did this happen? How did something this transparently evil, this obviously cruel, ever made it past a single sane person, let alone become a celebrated breakthrough performed on over 40,000 Americans? It is absolute insanity. It is insanity to take a 6-inch steel spike, place it against the thin bone above a living person's eye, tap it with a mallet, and then sweep it back and forth through the frontal lobes until the patient finally goes quiet. It is insanity to call that progress. It is insanity to look a frightened, vulnerable young woman in the face and tell her father that she will be much more manageable after this. And it is the cruelest form of arrogance to believe that you are somehow entitled to erase the parts of another person that inconvenience you. Real science moves slowly, cautiously, through hypothesis, rigorous testing, and decades of scrutiny. Real medicine is bound by one non-negotiable rule written in stone. First, do no harm. Yet, in the 1940s, harm became the entire point. Egas Moniz, the Portuguese neurologist who pioneered this procedure in 1935, drilled into 20 patients, injected pure alcohol to destroy brain tissue, watched 1 die, 7 deteriorate, and still declared the experiment a triumph. In 1949, the Nobel Committee handed him medicine's highest honor. And then we turned it into a traveling circus. Dr. Walter Freeman did not even bother with operating theaters. He drove across the country in what he proudly called his lobotomobile, set up in clinics, hotel conference rooms, even state hospital basements, and performed the transorbital lobotomy in under 10 minutes. He kept count like a salesman, thousands of notches on his belt. He took before and after photographs the same way hunters pose with trophies. And every swing of that mallet was a direct violation of first do no harm. Because turns out, ego came first, convenience came first, prestige and greed came first. Institutional budgets and desperate families begging for any solution came first. The patient was simply a material being worked on. Turns out, things become a whole lot easier once you stop caring. Which once again begs the question, how did this happen? Let's go back to the 1930s. Back then, mental hospitals in Europe and US were medieval warehouses. Hundreds of thousands of people, schizophrenics, manic depressives, epileptics, the intellectually disabled, alcoholics, were locked away forever, with zero effective treatments. The few options we had at the time were brutal: induced coma with insulin, seizures, ice-cold baths for days, straight jackets, and padded cells. And all of it was expensive, labor-intensive, and absolutely useless. It didn't actually cure anything. It just kept the noise down. And into this desperate, depressive vacuum stepped a Portuguese neurologist named Antonio Egas Moniz, the villain of our tale. In 1935, at a conference in London, he heard an American researcher report that chimps become dramatically calmer after their frontal lobes were destroyed. Moniz's reaction wasn't the appropriate horror, it was inspiration. Because just 2 months later, he operated on his first human patient, drilled 2 holes into the skull, inject pure alcohol into the white matter to burn it away. He called it a leucotomy. White matter cutting. 20 patients in the first series. The results: 1 dead, 7 much worse, the rest calmer. And Moniz declared it a miracle and published immediately. The medical world, starving for anything that worked, ate it up. In 1936, the procedure crossed the Atlantic. American neurologist Walter Freeman and neurosurgeon James Watts refined it into the precision prefrontal lobotomy, a fancy name for something so crude. And by 1940, the waiting lists were years long. But then Freeman gets impatient. He invents the transorbital lobotomy, the ice pick method, in 1946. No drilling, no surgeon's office, 10 minutes, local anesthetic, and simply $25 per patient. He demonstrates it first on a corpse, then on a live housewife in his Washington office while reporters watch. From 1946 to the early 50s, the numbers explode. Over 40,000 in the US, 17,000 in Britain, and tens of thousands more worldwide. And these were the reported ones. It was performed on children as young as 4, on housewives who nagged too much, on gay men to cure them, all while the evidence was right there. Right there were the patients who could no longer feel joy, no longer plan and remember their own children. The patients who seized, drooled, and died on the table. But the trains kept coming because the asylums were full and the doctors finally had a cure they could finish before lunch. Let's just be real. The Nobel Prize was not and never has been the final word on scientific and medical virtue. It's a foundational achievement, but it's also an award. And awards can be wrong. More so, awards reflect the biases of society and its people at the time. And there have been plenty prizes awarded for, let's just say, less than noble causes. There was Julius Wagner, who won in 1927 for treating syphilis with malaria, basically trading one deadly disease for another. And then there was, of course, the godfather of the lobotomy himself, Antonio Egas Moniz, who snagged the 1949 Nobel Prize in Physiology for discovering the therapeutic value of leucotomy. That's right, the same guy who rushed from chimp experiments to hacking into human skulls in mere months, with a body count and a trail of ruined lives. Because the Nobel Committee did not just overlook the carnage, they celebrated it as innovation. And Moniz's award wasn't just some outlier. It was the pinnacle of a system that rewarded bold risks over patients, especially when those risks were taken on the voiceless and vulnerable. Don't get me wrong, the Nobel has honored genuine breakthroughs. It does that more often than it does not, but its track record on medicine is littered with duds and disasters. Take Johannes Freiberg in 1926, awarded for discovering a cancer-causing parasite that turned out to be bogus, or Paul Hermann Muller from 1948 for DDT, hailed as a malaria fighter until it poisoned the planet. But you know what separates these laureates from Moniz? It's a very simple distinction. It's that there is being incorrect about something. There is ignorance born of limitations, of yourself or of the time you live in. And there is the monstrously callous call to prioritize prestige and convenience over a life. Because you sure as hell can fake and misjudge a great many things. But it's damn difficult to mistake your patient turning blank-eyed after your miracle treatment. When the dust finally settled, nobody apologized. That's one of the stranger things about medical history, that catastrophes don't end with a confession and a handcuff. They end with a quiet pivot. Everyone simply pretends they always knew better. By the mid 1950s, psychiatric drugs arrived, Thorazine then others, and lobotomy didn't die, it was replaced. Not renounced, not condemned, just set aside. Like a fashion mistake, the profession hoped no one remembered. A fashion mistake that took over 40,000 souls with it. Hospitals stopped scheduling them. Freeman's reputation cracked. But Moniz kept his noble, and tens of thousands of former patients were left to age and rot in institutions. Empty shells shuffled between wards by underpaid staff. Families buried the story out of shame. Doctors buried it out of pride. And institutions buried it because institutions are allergic to blame. Meanwhile, the public memory evaporated. Our cultural amnesia can truly be astonishing sometimes, because we can recall which Kennedy was shot from which angle, but Rosemary, the sister who was surgically erased, is a footnote, an anecdote in a biography. And maybe that's the most grotesque part of the whole thing, that the world moved on without ever looking back, as if the only thing that mattered was that the experiment ended, not that it ever happened. Because the truth is unsettling. Lobotomy wasn't a fluke. It wasn't the lone, mad idea of a few eccentric men. It was the natural consequence of a system designed to privilege authority over evidence, convenience over compassion, and compliance over humanity. Give a desperate institution too much power, starve it of oversight, populate it with men eager to be remembered, and you don't get medicine, you get improvised cruelty with a grant. And the lesson is not historical trivia, it's a mirror. Because every generation believes it's too damn enlightened to repeat the sins of the last. Every profession insists its ethics will hold. Every expert assumes future scientists will look back and admire the boldness of their innovations, not recoil in disbelief. But history keeps a ledger, and medicine, for all its brilliance, has never been innocent. So the lobotomy was a warning about what happens when the powerless become raw material, when suffering becomes a technical problem, when convenience masquerades as cure, and when men with titles mistake applause for moral approval. Which leaves us with only one responsible conclusion: that if something this barbaric could pass as medicine once, something like this can pass again. Different tools, different words, same logic. Unless someone somewhere decides to care before the damage is already done. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing and liking, and thank you for watching.